All right, everybody. So today we have Chris Duffin with us, the mad scientist. So welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Dave.
So I actually came across you a long time ago on the Iron Addicts forums, and I kind of wanted to get into your
Oh, dang,
background.
that is a ways back.
Yeah, a long time ago. When Wesley was around, and he and I actually worked together a little bit, and then John Pinder took over. So yeah, I know you
Yeah.
from way back then.
I still talk to John every now and again, and one of the other fellow because I was a moderator there.
Yeah.
But another one of them has done pretty well. Ben Bruno.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing pretty well for himself. I'm gonna head down and see him actually in the next couple months. So.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember him from back then, and then I saw he's like writing articles now on Teenage. I mean, he's definitely blown up a lot since those days.
Oh, you should look at his client list. It's like Justin Timberlake, Kate Upton, Chelsea
Oh,
Handler.
wow. I
Tons
didn't
of
realize it was to that level.
NBA and NFL professional. No, he lives in 90210 and does all very top. So it's pretty. Go check out his Instagram. It's pretty funny.
Wow.
He's a good dude. So anyway.
Yeah, very cool. So anyway, like I said before, one of the main things with this podcast is donating to charity for each one, and I like to get a unique one for every guest. So I know a while back when we had first started talking on Facebook, you were doing kind of like a month-long deadlift challenge, right? And you were deadlifting how much every day?
880 pounds. Well,
Yeah.
881 pounds, 400 kilograms.
Yeah, pretty insane. And and that was for Alex's lemonade stand, right? So
yeah, so I've done a number of charity fundraisers like that, and Alex's lemonade stand really stands out to me. It's a great charity. Basically, all the funds go to childhood cancer research, and the story behind it is just really, really powerful. I've spoken with Alex's mother. So Alex has passed away. She started the fundraiser when she was, I believe, 6 years old. She was diagnosed with cancer, and she said she was going to start a lemonade stand to raise money for research, and she was going to raise $1 million and with her lemonade stand, and she did that. And it has continued on, and I'm not sure where they're at, but it's like somewhere in the neighborhood of like 60 or $80 million that they've raised. Because she passed away at 8 years old, but she really did a lot and just kept like persevering, and just hearing that story in person from her mother as well.
Oh, sure.
It really drives home. And my business partner recently had one of his grandkids had cancer, and they were able to fight through that. Caught it early enough, but that was happening like right before this as well. So
wow. So
anyway,
obviously you very, very good cause.
Yep.
And so that's where my donation today will go, and we'll also have a link below in the description. So anybody who's listening, if you want to donate as well, that's obviously appreciated. So like I said, you have a very long history in this endeavor. And the first time I guess I knew you were a big deal is because, like I said, I had worked with Wesley, who was the main moderator of Iron Addicts. And I remember just reading a post of his that he was very impressed with you. And so I was like, oh, well, that's a big deal then, because I don't think he was very easily impressed. And I saw some of your lifts kind of in the little signature there on your username, and I was very impressed. And I know those weren't even your PRs or anything as of this date. So can you just kind of give us a little background on how you even got into all this?
Lifting has been a big part of my life for a long time. So I think I started somewhere around 1988, 89, somewhere in there. So I've been at it for 30 years or so. So a little bit of experience. And I've always been just a really highly technical nerd type. And I just always felt that there was, you need to counterbalance that. And so I've always really enjoyed like pushing my body to its physical limits, and also kind of the emotional side, mental side of that as well. And I ended up, I was still working in the industry outside of this at the time that Iron Addicts was around, but I ended up heading down a different path with my career initially. So I got a couple engineering degrees, an MBA, and went into corporate world, and kind of progressed through the ranks and became a corporate executive doing company turnarounds and shit like that. And in the interim, I owned a gym on the side because I was really frustrated with the quality of facilities, and I felt that there was three things that, it was for very selfish reasons. Like, I wanted to be the best, and so I knew I had to have the right tools. I needed to have the right methods and the right environment, and I basically had to build that. And so here I was, competing at a very high level. I was ranked number one in the world for like 8 years straight. And, working this very high stress corporate career, competing against people that basically didn't have jobs. They're maybe a gym owner or a trainer or whatever. But, that's, and then here I am, doing all that, and then having kids, hobbies, and all that other stuff on top of it. So, so after about 18 years of that, I decided it was time to chase it full time. And in the course of building the gym and building all my equipment, like I said, I'm a highly technical nerd type. I was really frustrated with, one, what I was seeing across the internet as far as like what people were promoting for, mentality, movement, all that sort of stuff within the lifting realm. It was leaving a lot of people broken. And then a lot of the equipment was just really not designed to optimize physical performance. And you kind of had to be in bad positions, other things, just work around to do it. A big example of that is the straight barbell.
Yeah.
We use a straight barbell for all sorts of stuff. Squatting, when you're squatting with a straight barbell. So I'm going to go on a tangent for a second.
Yeah, go for it.
But it puts a huge load on a demand for external rotation on the shoulders, big stress on the bicep tendon insertion into the shoulder, right? And so if we compromise those things or let loosen the tension in there, we go into extension, which then allows us, we don't get good stabilization of the torso because the diaphragm is not working in opposition to the pelvic floor. Now we're at risk for, lumbar disc issues. And so it just goes down why? Because we're using a straight barbell and we got to fight against it to maintain position. So anyway, stuff like that. I guess you can kind of tell already. I'm kind of passionate about this stuff.
Yeah.
So I had the background in manufacturing because I'd run automotive manufacturing companies, aerospace manufacturing, electromechanical, all sorts of stuff. And I'm just like, I own a gym already. I've got a testing facility. I know manufacturing. Yeah. I know freaking movement. And by that time, I developed a really great network in the kind of the research and rehab arena, which you can see if you go to the Kabuki Strength Advisory Board. You can see like people that have put their names behind our company, which include the likes of Dr. Stu McGill, Dr. Kelly Starrett, Dean Somerset. We've got Sue Falsone, the first woman head strength coach in any professional sport in North America. We've got the current head strength coach for the LA Dodgers and the Cleveland Indians. We've got the executive director for the Cleveland Clinic, so arguably one of the best orthopedic surgeons in the world. These are the names of people behind like supporting what we do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's like the net. So I had a lot of background to. I'm running on tangents here, David. So if you want to
go
back in, go ahead. So that's where a lot of my philosophy on like movement and positions and all this sort of stuff, training methodologies came out of. And because, I've got these people as friends, and there's more than that, but these are,
big names.
And, naming names, so I sound cool, stuff.
Right. Yeah. But so was that always the case? I mean, you've been doing this for 30 years or so. Were you always passionate about these kind of technical aspects?
I was always, yes. I'm someone that's a high level of attention to detail. I've got spreadsheets on everything. I'm constantly modifying, tinkering. I build, one of my hobbies is building vehicles. I build vehicles from the ground up, like design my own axles and
wow.
Suspension, steering systems, which is it's all the same stuff. It's a balance of stability and mobility and, leverages and like, it's all the same thing. And so like, I look at a vehicle, I'm like, that's not designed right.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So
No, that's very impressive, man.
so that's just the way my brain works. And so yeah, I just got to a point. I'm like, I'm ready to take this on and go after it full steam. So 4.5 years ago, yeah, 4.5 years ago, I quit my main career. I already owned Kabuki Strength, the gym, and started Kabuki Strength, the equipment company, with my business partner with the gym. I've got a partner with this, and I guess I have multiple partners now because we've got investors and board of directors and all that sort of stuff because we're a pretty growing company. We'll put it that way. So
yeah.
And
can you explain the name behind that, Kabuki Strength, for people who don't know the background?
Sure can. It's actually pretty simple. So we talked about I said 3 things to make things successful, right? Was equipment, methods, and environment. Well, environment helps affect some internal factors. Okay, so if you have the right environment, it helps that. But we can't control. I can't control, David, like your mental perspective on things.
Sure.
But what I can do is provide you the right tools and the right methods. So I have currently a company that has 2 different divisions. One is creating educational content. So we've got an entire staff of folks that are producing free educational content daily that's going across YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. We've got subscription-based platforms for more in-depth content. We've got our website, written content, all that sort of stuff. So we've got a full staff of people doing that. That's the methodology. Okay. Mm-hmm. Seminars, we go in and we do private training for a lot of different Major League Baseball teams, a lot of different colleges. So we have public seminars and private seminars that we do for professional and collegiate teams. And then the equipment is the method is the other side of it. But the last side of it is when you get in to whatever your sport or your training is, you've got to put your game day face on. Only you can bring the mental attitude, and that's putting on your squat face, your Kabuki face, your Kabuki mask. And so Kabuki is a form of theater, but basically they'd put a mask on and go out and become another person. It can also be tied to kind of that warrior mentality, same thing, where, you've got, a village of people trying to protect themselves from, the marauders or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And to do that, the people there have to transform and, go fight and, kill or maim or do whatever it is. But, and that's where a lot of the background of like why people wear face paint and masks and stuff like that is the actual transformation to become another person that's going to do things that you're not going to do normally. And so it's that mental transition. So Kabuki is get your squat face on. We'll provide you the equipment and the methods. You need to put your game day face on when you step into the gym or on the platform or on the field of play, right? And so I can try to motivate you and provide you, the mental side of it. But at the end of the day, it's up to you. And cool. Which is actually, so that's a nice carryover into my book that just released today.
Yeah, go for
and
it.
As of literally 5 minutes, so I went live at 8 a.m. today. We're at 2:30 right now. Hit Amazon bestseller in 3 different categories already.
Wow, man. So, congrats.
So anyway, but that's that piece is more around the inspiration, motivation, and tools around the mental, emotional, spiritual side of things. So cool. It's a very, very cool piece. So anyway.
No, that is cool. And we'll definitely go circle back around at the end to the book too. Going into
that's how Kabuki got started, is just trying to put things out there and do things and correct things in the industry that I'm very passionate about. They were being done wrong, and just having a positive voice of change that's got some background and content behind it, and to be able to start driving a change in the equipment that people are using as well, to be able to get them in better positions. The whole thing about strength training and the beauty of strength training is the beauty of life itself. Okay. So the beauty of life is living, and living is growing. Mm-hmm. And what is growing? The only way that we grow is by adapting to stress. Okay. And but not all stresses are necessarily good. So eliminating those negative stresses and allowing us to, to achieve, achieve our full potential in the gym, reduce injury risks, all those sorts of things.
Right. Yeah. And again, I know you talk about how passionate you are. I think anybody listening can tell, like, this is not just a face you put on, really. But I mean, for you, it's just an overall life passion. You're very clearly into it, and you clearly want to help a lot of people. I think the first time I came across anything of yours that was more unique, like a little different, was the ShouldeRok, which I think was the first thing
that was the first
created,
product,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Which was a little risky because mace swinging now is like is a thing, like people. Yeah. But when I introduced the mace, the ShouldeRok, which is it's a loadable mace. Mm-hmm. So it's an improved, and I produced some educational content on how to use it correctly. But it was a very, very small, culty thing. Mm-hmm. That you might be able to find a few like YouTube videos on, right? People doing it, but they were not doing it correctly, by the way. And so it was a little risky to like come out with a completely new product that nobody had ever seen before. But the thing is, like, mace swinging done right is just incredibly powerful. It's the oldest weighted strength training piece of equipment there is. Mm-hmm. Like, it dates back. People love to, the kettlebell this or that, blah, 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 that. I'm like, yeah, that's minuscule in comparison. The Gata, is it's traditionally called. It's been around for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. Why? Because it works. That's why.
So what kind of benefits, because you mentioned two things there, like obviously it helps people, but then you said a lot of people are doing it wrong. Yep. In some of the videos that I've seen of you, you break things down so specifically that I almost wonder, do you find that people who don't maybe get help from you directly are often kind of misguided in their way of using your tools?
Well, so that's why we're an educational company first. A lot of our products are very new to the industry when they come out, and it takes education. And so that's why we have such a background with, and the staff on the educational side. So right there on our product pages, we put it there. We may email you potentially afterwards with videos, and then, put out a lot of just content that's pushed across social media as well. But it's really important for us to get that educational aspect right. And because, people just may not understand the fundamental mechanisms of what's going on. And this goes across the board. Like, so most of the maces, so I said mace swinging is now a thing. Nearly every manufacturer out there is making maces inappropriately. They're the wrong length. So they actually don't deliver the primary benefit, because there's a bit of neurology going on with the balance of contraction to relaxation, and you have to have a weight on a specific lever to actually force you to have the relaxation phase. Otherwise, you're doing nothing more than a kettlebell halo. Which kettlebell halo is a nice movement. It is not the same thing as a swing, though. And if we want to dive into some of the neurology that's going on there, we can. But that's where the education comes in pretty important, and actually understanding the background of what's actually happening in the body and why we're doing the things and what goal we're hoping to accomplish.
Yeah. And where are you even, I guess, yourself getting this education? Because, I mean, the neurology of mace swing, I mean, it's just so outside of the realm of, I've been doing this for 15 years myself, and I really couldn't even begin to tell you anything about it. So you're definitely, in your own realm there.
Yeah. So I steal from all sorts of philosophies. It's just part of, I guess, how my brain works. So I can see a lot of things from a lot of different disciplines, mm-hmm. and that's the way, like, I see the interconnected webs of, and so I've taken a lot of actual clinical based coursework, extra, even though I haven't gone to school on the for physical therapy or chiropractic or anything like that. I've taken a lot of the
CE courses,
continuing education courses, and again, basically getting to know the people that are teaching those courses or writing the books on the material, so that if I've got questions, I'm actually going much, much deeper than most people would have access to. Yeah. So when I'm talking about the neurology there, I'm actually stealing a bit from a developmental kinesiology, and so some of the positionings and other things, and it's just, like I said, understanding that connected web and putting it together. So with mace swing, Nothing that we do is new, honestly, at the end of the day, right? When I talk about neurology, it's Muhammad Ali saying, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
Right.
Okay. It's that balance of athleticism. The speed to contraction is related to speed to or speed to relaxation is related to speed to contraction, right? And, maybe it's a bit, of my engineering brain at work as well. But so if we're moving a kettlebell around our head, we're in a constant state of contraction. We never have a pure relaxation phase. So now if I put a weight on a giant lever, okay, and now I'm moving the shoulders, and engaging all the muscles that support that entire shoulder girdle through their range of motion, right? And I've got this weight on a huge lever. I actually can't hold it in certain positions within that movement. I can't slow it down. Mm-hmm. The movement is very dynamic. And so you have to accomplish a swing, you have to learn to relax. Okay. So if I take a big muscled bodybuilder and teach them to mace swing, I actually have to start with a lot of weight. A lot of people are always like, oh, I need to start with it empty to learn. You can't. You have to have enough weight so that you can't control it at all times. Now we're taking that shoulder and we've got a good stabilized core position. We're not going into extension patterns, right? And now we're pulsing all the muscles that support that shoulder girdle on and off as we move it through an entire range of motion. And that's so a big problem of why people start getting the frozen back or restricted movements, right? Is because we have, these compensatory patterns kind of developing, right? Where if the right muscle stabilizing, and we could argue that this isn't actually right, but it's an easy way to explain it, and it's pretty close to the accuracy of it. Is we have the wrong muscles getting tight to control to stabilize that joint, and then we start getting the restrictions and the limitation in mobility. If we want to really dive deeper than that, which would be much more discussions, but it's a really good analogy to kind of see and understand what I'm talking about. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And so, is it something that you think most people could benefit from? You look at a certain client and say, "This is something that you need specifically."
No, it's an incredible tool for nearly everyone. We have all sorts of. So I have a lot of clinics that deal with non-weightlifting populations, and they use the ShouldeRok quite a bit. Okay. So all sorts of athletic populations. Let's talk about what are some of the basic issues that we see in populations today. Some of the most common, low back pain, and the other is shoulder problems, right? Yep. These are two very prevalent issues that we see today. Why? We get to the root of it: breathing patterns, stress, all the sitting all the time. The research just around I got to have good text position. It doesn't matter about good text position. Sitting, staring at a screen, computers, cell phones, whatever, is known to change breathing patterns and starting the tightening of those muscles. Because again, as the diaphragm stops working, they're not working correctly for breathing patterns. We lose stabilization. Again, this whole pathway starts going. And this is a great way of using movement to correct it. And that's wherever possible, that's what we want to do, because that is the biggest fix, is not to sit there and lay on a table and have somebody fix you, but is to exercise in a manner that corrects this stuff, because that's, again, it gives us an adaptive response as well. We get back to just what I've talked about at the beginning, right?
Right.
That's why movement and load are such amazing things. Sure. Because, we could go, I'm going to go get a massage that'll make you feel better. And, the next day it's tight again. Right. Because of those things. And we sell soft tissue tools. We've got an entire line of ISATM tools that we sell for our company, and I don't want you to use them. It's the truth. But at times we're going to need to. We've got triage work. We've got whatever, something pops up. But if somebody's relying on, I have to freaking foam roll my IT bands every day before I squat. Well, shit. Sometimes you might not think about it and realize that you don't have an IT band problem. Yeah. You got a squat problem. So
something I wanted to ask you about. I mean, it kind of relates to this. Maybe slightly controversial. Is I saw a video of yours, close to a year ago now. and it was talking about the hip thrust and
Yes.
and everybody obviously knows there's somebody who has gotten very popular regarding the popularization of the hip thrust, and I think you have some significant disagreements there. So if you're willing to, I'd like
sure.
to
I'll dive into that. And yeah, we're talking about Bret Contreras, the glute guy. He's a friend of mine. And yeah, we have some different viewpoints here, and we can discuss them openly. We're actually, I think, a lot more on common ground than most people believe we are. My issue is because if we look at, so this comes back to leverages again, basically, and actually some of the research that Bret has produced recently reinforces my statement. So now I'll dive first into that aspect of it, because so many people, my issue is not really with the hip thrust, but with strength athletes using the hip thrust, thinking that they're going to develop more power for squatting and deadlifting, which I say is not going to happen. And more research now is saying that. And the other is, if you go heavy, and I think this is the issue, if people are trying to max out, and this is where we differentiate, because Bret does believe in maxing out on it. But when I've talked to him, he says, oh no, most people shouldn't be going that heavy. But then he goes and maxes out. But anyway.
Yeah, right.
So there's a couple different topics there. And so first one, let's talk about force vectors. So very simple thing to understand. Well, I guess not very. There's a lot of different vectors we could add, rotational vectors, but the easiest is, this is very simple. Strength athletes, barbell athletes, let's say weightlifters, strongmen, powerlifters, for example. And this was the issue when I posted this video. There was a bunch of people posting 800-900 pound, hip thrusters. And I'm like, people, knock it off. You're wasting, stop this. Why? And so that was what my video, that's what my video was about. Well, so the hip thrust is a horizontal force vector. So yes, you're laying down and the weight's going up, but to your body, it's a horizontal vector. And as a strength athlete, nearly everything except for bench pressing, let's say, is an axial loaded vector. The weight coming down through the spine from the top into the ground, and you're resisting it going the opposite direction. Okay, so training the wrong vector, so running a prowler, running with a sled, it's going to help with aerobic capacity, but is not going to enhance your ability to handle more squatting, more deadlifting. And so again, now the research is coming out showing this. A hip thruster develops your ability to sprint faster, horizontal vector, to jump farther, horizontal vector, but not enhance the ability to squat or deadlift more.
Did they look at vertical jump?
They did. And I don't believe it had an effect on the vertical jump either. So it's a horizontal force vector. So understand your vectors that you want to train. Okay. So if I'm a strength athlete, let's think about this. Sitting on a machine and doing chest supported rows to develop my lats, thinking that it's going to develop my deadlift, you could argue a little bit that you're going to be able to have more mass there, but that vector again is a horizontal vector. It's a front to back vector, but a bent over barbell row is going to transfer much better. It's a bit of a mixed vector there, because we've got a little bit of a horizontal and a little bit of axial, but now we've got a more of an axial bias in there. Not saying that's always the case, because hey, I need to look at my overall programming methodology and my frequency of my amount of axial loaded movement. And if I have too much, maybe that's where I need to pull a barbell row out and go with something that's less. But understand the differences that's going to have in your training and where it's going to carry over to. And I think it's really important for anybody that deals with athletic populations to understand and look at force vectors.
Sure. Yeah, that is interesting.
So the second part of that is the length from the hip to the knee and the length from the hip to the shoulder, okay? And how far those levers are. And so when you put a barbell across your hip and go to try to extend your hip, if you are an 800-pound deadlifter and you're doing an 800-pound hip thrust, it's impossible that you can maintain good spinal position. So you may be training the glutes independently, but you're not training the glutes how they should be working with good core stabilization, all that intra-abdominal pressurization, like all the thoracico-lumbar musculature and the abdominal musculature and the activity of the diaphragm and against the pelvic floor, like all that, along with the rotation and alignment of the hip joint, and then how the glutes are engaged and working with all that together. Mm-hmm. It will not happen because you will be in a rotated position at the pelvis. You'll be in, what is that, anterior or posterior? No, that's anterior. You'll be tilted anteriorly. You'll be in an extended pattern through the torso. It will happen. It's simple fact. And I demonstrated this in that video, or maybe a second follow-up video, where I took a weight and hung it off the two distances like that and used tension meters to pull it apart. And I think my math came up to basically anything, if you're an 800-pound deadlifter, well, let's just say, for easy math, 1,000-pound deadlifter, mm-hmm. You can only do a hip, you could only do the same. So the force at the hip to reach full extension is 300 pounds.
Wow. So quite a bit less.
So if you're going over 3 plates, and then maybe you're not maintaining position. Maybe you're not training the glutes in an athletic development pattern. Maybe you're just building a big booty. And that's what Bret's clientele is looking for. So right. Bret is 100% on. Mm-hmm. And so my argument is, don't train super freaking heavy on the hip thruster. Guess what? I do them for you go on my subscription site for corrective movements, and you'll see various different, versions of it when we're working on people that are struggling with hip extension, glute engagement, all this sort of stuff. But we're typically doing body weight type stuff or very limited resistance.
Now, in a situation like that, I guess two things I would wonder. I mean, so for one, for the people who are doing it for, glute hypertrophy, it seems like it's okay then to go a little bit heavier. Yeah. And then secondly, kind of
I'm just saying it's not going to carry over mm-hmm. into more athletic use of how that glute is working in a system through the entire body.
Right. Could it indirectly, kind of what you were saying with, the building the lats for the deadlift, could it indirectly, if you have bigger glutes, in theory, there's more potential for strength in that muscle, so that could help slightly for a deadlift, or do you think it wouldn't even be worth it?
Well, what we're seeing now in the research is that it doesn't. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other two, a lot of people think about the glutes as for being the primary hip extenders. But I argue that our bigger issue is typically what I see is weak adductors. Mm. And so when we're getting that hip into a full extension pattern that actors plan to play, and if it's weak, we're going to have inhibition of the glutes for firing because we're going to have a compromised adductor. So you're going to be fully limited. Like, we could sit there and work the glutes all day long and build big, massive glutes. And if we're not addressing and balancing the relationship with the adductors,
yeah,
you're not going to be able to use and recruit that muscle fiber when you need to.
Now, do you have any specific recommendations to help that weak point of the weak adductors?
One of my favorites is the Copenhagen adduction drill. So, if you look it up, you'll see it done in a sport application where another person's like holding the first person. Mm-hmm. But you can look to our videos, and we just do it on a bench as a single person because it was mostly done, Copenhagen. So it's it was done in soccer originally, and that's where, that's why it's done on the field, because there's research shows a pretty significant reduction, I believe, in groin and hamstring strains in the players. And but it's a really powerful drill, and we can also train it in a fully extended pattern. We can focus on IAP wearing it. So you're basically starting with in a side plank. It's basically a side plank with the upper leg sitting on a bench, and then you engage that the adductor on the upper leg and pull the hip up into a fully neutral position, and then pull the lower leg up to the bottom of the bench. So you're in this full side plank position with the bottom leg completely unsupported. You've got you're resting on your elbow, and you've got a nice, packed shoulder. You're making sure you're not extended through the spine. You've got great IAP, and then you release at the hip and let your torso sink down while maintaining neutral torso position. So you're sinking through the hip, and then you also at the same time lower the lower leg, so that as you come up, you're both engaging that lower adductor, not as hard, and the upper adductor at once, and then switch over and do it on the other side. Regressions would be doing that on a floor with the leg, with just the lower leg kind of resting on the floor, and just pulling yourself into a neutral position, or doing it on a bench with the support instead of at the ankle, doing it further up, like towards the knee, particularly if you've got somebody with some knee issues or things like that. Again, you can find, if you just type this drill in, you'll probably see YouTube videos or Instagram videos of ours up there, really well coached with detailed stuff on there. But really incredible drill. I love it. Is a firing tool as well. So it's a movement preparation before training, and it gives you incredible feedback on how the body's working and where all that stuff's feeling for the day.
Nice, man. Yeah, and you're obviously very well known, I mean, overall, but especially for your deadlift. So for people who don't know, could you tell us what your PRs on the big three are?
Yeah, so my deadlift, well, we'll say 2 3/4. I didn't lock out the third rep, was 1,000 pounds. And it is the first rep set the Guinness World Record, because I'm the only person that's ever deadlifted 1,000 pounds in the sumo style. This was done at a...
oh, wow, really?
Yeah. Wow. So there's Guinness World Record sitting on the wall over here. Well, not behind me. It's on another wall over here. But and I'm the only person that's ever done 1,000 pound for reps on a deadlift. And I am also the lightest and the oldest person to ever deadlift 1,000 pounds.
Wow.
So
how old are you now?
I'm 42.
42. Okay. Wow, so, man, very impressive.
The bench, nothing too impressive there. My best is 500 pounds. My elbows. So this is kind of the thing that set me on the path of meeting all those people I talked to you about earlier in the podcast, and I destroyed those a long time ago. Along with, some discs in my back and all sorts of other issues. I was kind of a mess. I had great technique of what looked like technique, but didn't functionally have the right things happening in my body over a decade ago. And I destroyed both my elbows. Also because I've got a neurological disorder as well, where I don't feel certain types of pain. So I was able to just drive my and so anyway, I've got really bad elbows. I've pressed close to 600 pounds off my chest. I just can't get it to lock out.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
So basically I don't press anymore because of my elbows. I got really limited both flexion and extension, particularly in my right arm. Just damage at this point I can't really undo. I've had surgery on both of them to try to maintain as much movement as possible. But that's the one that kind of set me on the path of where I am now, saying, hey, you need to dive further into this area. And this is what I do when I dive further into an area. So
yeah. Do you do anything? Do you do anything? I mean, obviously your upper body still looks very developed. So are you doing any maybe like isolation work that doesn't bother it or anything like that? Oh yeah. Yeah. So I just don't like pressing because my right arm doesn't go past 90 degrees. And so at the bottom of the bench, it'll run into bone on bone, which I don't feel. But that'll cause a little bit of forward rotation of that right shoulder, which compromises that joint integrity. If I continue at it, I'll end up with some shoulder pain after a while. So I do a lot of cable work, and I do a lot of, just other upper body work. I'm just kind of limited by amount of mostly flexion on the right arm kind of really limits my ability. So like overhead pressing, stuff like that is really challenging because I can't, you can go, oh, you can only go halfway, which is fine. But then as soon as you start fatiguing, you're going to start driving. You're not going to be able to maintain those positions with both arms. Anyway. Right, right.
And so I'm kind of a little bit limited there. And then squatting, I held the all-time world record in the 220-pound weight class at 881 pounds. It's since been beaten. That was at the time the heaviest 4 times body weight squat in history. My best since then was in the gym in a meet I was training for was 944. This is with just knee wraps. And that's what I'm currently training for right now, is to do another final feat of strength for the squat. But that's so those are big like PRs, but my feats of strength stuff, I squatted 800 pounds every single day for 30 days is a fundraiser for the Special Olympics.
Okay.
And this is something that nobody's ever come close to doing.
Yeah.
That
How'd you
level
feel
of
after that?
Oh boy, I was messed up. People are like, oh, what was your compensation from that? How much did it add to your squat? And I'm like, I think you're missing the point here. Like,
Yeah.
that's not a training program. That was something that left me worse off. I did it
Sure.
as a feat.
That's crazy.
But people are like, well, yeah, but it's only such and such % of your squat, and maybe I could do that too. And I'm like, you understand, 800 pounds is still 800 pounds.
Right.
So 90% of a 500-pound squat still is not 800 pounds. So you still have the same joints and ligaments, and people kind of miss that.
Yeah.
That's why nobody trains that heavy that frequently.
Right.
And then you mentioned the other one, which was the Alex's lemonade stand. I deadlifted 400 kilo, 881 pounds every day for 17 days. Unfortunately, detached a hamstring, and towards the end of that, at the end of that, that's what set that one off short. That one was a little too aggressive. I knew that I wasn't going to make the 30 days, and I knew that it would probably end in some sort of injury.
Really?
Which is, I run the risk of that when I'm doing things that nobody's ever done before. So
did you know that at the start, or as it was progressing?
No, yeah, I was hopeful, but my intuition told me that I was a little too aggressive. But 860 pounds or 855, I'm like, I want that 400 and it's just like a few pounds less, and it would have been like, it's just so pushing the top end there.
Sure.
Everybody loves there's a great video of me doing a 675-pound deadlift for 20 reps, and I think I did that in about 30 seconds or so. So
really,
a lot of people consider that as the greatest deadlifting feat, because it's pretty nutty. Watch the bar, and it just it's just moving so fast. I did that sumo, and then I came back and did 10 more conventional. I think I could have finished done another 10 and done 20 conventional, but I had to go puke. So kind of put that short.
Did you know, from the start? I mean, you just had this freak strength. When did that realization happen?
Well, in high school, I remember when I was wrestling, physically I could tell, when I tied up with somebody, that I was stronger than anyone else. I was strength training, but anybody in the state, I could physically dominate. So I'm like, okay, I definitely, a little stronger than most people.
So even before you were weight training, you said?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, I was weight training then, but it was
okay.
Just part-time to support sports, and
Yeah.
I didn't do anything. It wasn't crazy strong, but I was, definitely, I went to a small high school, but I was the strongest guy there.
Yeah.
And then, I wasn't I was state level strong for a long time, and it's just been years and years. What I've discovered is I recover much better than most people. And so now we add that up. That's why I'm 42, and we're seeing my biggest feats were performed from 38 to 42, not at 25, not at 22, not at 28, 30 or 32, because it's just been really additive for me, because I'm genetically a little bit probably stronger than most.
A little bit.
But I definitely recover a lot faster than anybody. And I think these are, things to admit. A lot of, top athletes will tell you, no, it's all work ethic. It's all blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Yes, it was for any of those. They did outwork everybody, but they were able to outwork everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So same for me. I've outworked everybody around me for 30 years, but I was also able to.
Sure.
So, but I also had to do it.
Right. Right. It's both, of course.
Yeah. And then just figuring out the stuff that I know now and that we teach at Kabuki Strength, around, movement methodologies, joint position, how to effectively stabilize in the right ways, create the right tension through the body in the right areas. And that's really what's taken to the next level. I wouldn't be where I am without
Yeah.
basically what we teach today. There's just
Yeah.
no way. So, and
And
that's a long process to really develop and flesh that out.
how do you feel about the toll it takes on your body, not just in terms of, like, obviously, your joints have gotten banged up over the years, but even just, what's involved in being a high level powerlifter? I think your weight's probably like upper 200, right? Like 270, something like that. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm sitting about 265 right now.
Yeah. So just that overall toll on, the body, is that something you worry about, or not really so much at this point?
It is just what it is, honestly. So I don't regret it. I definitely have a long list of, like we talked about some already, of things that I have to deal with in my life that
Mm.
that I just have to deal with. And
Right.
but yeah, I don't regret anything. I definitely don't want people to follow in that path unless
Mm.
they're really pushing have the same perspective. Like, there's a difference if you're going and trying to set do something that nobody in the world's ever done, and
Right.
being okay with the fact, hey, if I go down with this squat, I may not come back up,
Yeah.
versus, hey, I'm going for a state record squat, I'm going to do that, like, no.
Right.
So everything that we teach is how to, because that's one of the things I feel is significantly wrong with the industry, is this pushing through pain mentality. And
Yeah.
I don't do that. But I do still continue to explore what the body, what our limitations are. And for me, it's really valuable because there's a big learning experience, and this is where a lot of stuff develops, and it develops out of necessity. The tools, the methods, the other things. Because when you're pushing that level, you learn things that, especially like these 30-day challenges, you, you're learning like a decade's worth of experience in 30 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't know how else to explain it. So for me, like, that's what I love. And guess what? There's a potential that I'm gonna be hurt or broken from that,
Hmm.
but I'm gonna be able to learn and share something in a manner that's gonna help, thousands, if not, more people,
Yeah.
not be able to train and have strength training be nothing but an additive aspect of life, which is what it should be.
Right. And I'm
And
really glad you put that perspective on it, just because, in a sense, like, you are at such a top level, and this is, what you do for your job. I mean, it's everything. And you could say the same, Ronnie Coleman, right? I mean, look at his shape now, but I don't think he'd ever regret that. Muhammad Ali, he's got all that brain damage, but he went down in history. And I do think that's awesome, and it's inspiring. I think it's also important that people look at those and realize, like, that's probably not something you should do unless you are a top 0.01 percenter,
Exactly. We're not talking the 1%er. We're talking the point. Yeah.
Right.
And that's what I'm really passionate about, is like helping people not be there and teaching them not to be there.
Right.
And honestly, I wouldn't have the injuries that I have right now, except for this more recent, hamstring issue from that deadlift challenge. I was too aggressive. And anyway, but I wouldn't have the other problems that I mentioned if I knew now what I knew, if I knew 20 years ago what I knew now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And for a long time I was like beating myself up. God, I didn't find the right people. I didn't find the right coaches. I didn't seek out the right. And then I'm like, wait a minute, this stuff wasn't around.
Yeah.
Like, there's no one that could have taught me this 20 years ago.
Right.
And I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I'm doing what I do now.
All right.
To get that out there, because it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. It's a good perspective.
Yeah. And so like I said, and that's my whole goal. Like, I mean, I don't push into pain or push that, like when it's, it's time, but it's like, oh, we've got something going on. We're going to figure out how to address it and deal with it and then get back to it. But I'm still, like I said, I'm going to push things the way that I push things, but it's different. It's different.
It is different.
That's all
Yeah.
I can say.
So briefly, I'd just like to hear, so there was actually an article that I had read years and years ago by Dave Tate on T Nation. And it was just something, where he said, he was talking about how everybody's form is horrible, and he was talking about bench pressing, and he said, I could take anybody, and if I, just with the tweaks of one session, I could add 50 pounds to their bench press. And, I hear that, and I think, probably just in part to write a good article. But do you think that for the average lifter in one day, there are these techniques or flaws in their technique that you could just change this, that, and the other and really add, 20, 30 pounds to a lift for the average person?
Absolutely. We do it here all the time, every week. So I mean, I've taken multiple people that literally have been in so much pain they can't squat, and in one session gotten them out of pain. In their first session of squatting again, they've tripled their old PR.
Tripled their old PR?
Yes, with zero pain, and they were in pain yesterday, and they haven't trained for 6 months.
Wow. What were in that example? What were the numbers? Do you remember?
What's that?
In that example.
Yeah, one was 400. More recent was a 450-pound squatter.
Wow.
So we do this all the time, and I've got a great analogy for it. It's a car analogy because I love cars and the mechanical things, right? And it goes back to the neurology and stuff like that, and it goes back to proper stabilization, tensioning in the body, good joint positions, all this stuff, right? So if you're driving and you got one of these newfangled cars and it's got this little button in there for traction control on it, okay, a lot of people think that when you have that traction control on and you're driving, you're going around the corner with some ice or snow or water on it, and one of the tires starts slipping, that it sends the power to the tire that's gripping. And that's not what happens. So the car is built much like we are. We've got connection to the ground, which is where everything power transfer starts. That's the tires or the feet in the human being. We've got our powertrain, which is our muscles, okay, putting that power through there. And then we've got our brain, which is the computer in the car. And then we've got neurology, which is all the sensors and everything that run out through the car and tell whether the tire is slipping, tell the transmission to do certain things, tell the engine to do certain things. So it's all pretty similar design and concept, right? And what actually happens is, to prevent that car from crashing and injuring itself and you, which is exactly the same thing the body will do, is that traction control detunes the engine and reduces the shift patterns, reduces power output. Okay. And so if we don't have good stabilization, and trust me, very few people, everybody thinks, oh, I know how to do this. They don't. I'm sorry, they don't. But and I haven't used the word bracing because, again, that's bracing is a very small anyway, we're going to get into a long discussions if I go down this route. But so if we don't have a good stable platform and a great connection to the ground, our body is going to sense it. Just like if I went out on ice and tried to sprint at full force, obviously I'm not going to be able to hit record numbers because of the ice. But guess what? You're not actually going to be able to put full force into your foot to run. Your body will detune because it's the same thing. It doesn't want you to go flying off that corner and crashing a fiery, burning death. So it detunes your freaking system. That's what it does. So if I can take that stuff and turn off the traction control, okay, by getting those joints in a good position, teaching the proper stabilization patterns, having you root effectively to the ground, all of a sudden, performance that was already there, you're going to be able to realize. So now think about this. Think about what's that going to mean on a training cycle? Like, oh my God, what's that going to mean year over year? What's that going to mean over 10 years if this whole last 10 years I've been training in a detuned state? I've been working up to 450 pounds as my max squat, but I've actually had the strength and capability to triple it. So I've been training way less than what I'm capable of this entire time because I have the protective parts of my body turned on. This is the same reason, like, why people, their hips start tightening up from squatting. Got to do all that foam rolling. No, the body's trying to protect that joint because it's in a compromised position. So it starts tightening and reducing the mobility around that joint to prevent you from injuring yourself and doing some dramatic issue, something major to the body or that joint structure. Okay. So the same thing that causes us to have restricted mobility is also the same things that are shutting you off and not allowing you to realize your true performance. And this is the stuff that we teach. I don't want to dive too far into it because this is we've got 3 courses, 2 days a piece that covers this.
Right.
But I think with your background, you understand a bit of what I'm talking about, right?
Sure.
And so that's all it is. So one, that'll get people out of pain if we're getting them in the right positions and having them stabilize effectively. So when I talk about pain with that, we're talking about somebody with low back pain.
Right.
Or could be pain with extension in the hips, like all sorts of stuff. Same thing. Like, I can't hit depth on my squat. It's my hips. I run into the acetabulum in my hip. It's definitely impossible. Got to have my lifted heeled shoes. Got to stretch those hamstrings because there's just no way they'll get there. And they've been doing that their entire life. There's not one person I've ever met that I can't within 15 minutes have them with zero stretching, squatting, the person that says they can't squat to depth.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens if we don't have a good stabilization in the torso of the qualities that I was talking about? If we don't have those developed and we're not using them, we've got 2 muscles that immediately tighten, that pull the hip socket to the front of the hip and reduce the range of motion of the hip joint. Yes. So we can change this stuff instantly. And it's not hard to do.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously that shows the value of going to these courses. I mean, there's only so much you can, I think, say online or something like that.
That's what I said. Even video is hard. Like, people are like, when are you going to write a book on this? I'm like, I'm not going to write a book on this. Like, it's hard enough in video because people will say, oh, I've been following all your stuff when they show up at the seminar. And you're like, okay, touch. Okay. Oh my God, I had no idea what you were really saying. I know. It's just, it's really hard to translate this stuff. That's why I didn't want to dive down the path of trying to explain it here. It's not complex stuff. It's not like, we're teaching rocket science or anything like that. But it's definitely something that is much easier taught with a little bit of tactile work. So
Right. So before we dive into the book a little bit, I just wanted to ask, as like an actionable step for people. Again, obviously, people most know you for your crazy deadlifts. If somebody said, and again, most people aren't going to meet you in person. So if somebody said, I'm really trying to hit a deadlift PR, I have a sticking point maybe halfway up. I'm sure it's going to still depend on the person, but is there like a key advice you could say for the next month, work on this?
Yes, absolutely. Work on your setup. It's all in the tension in the start of the lift. So you're not going to fix your problem with a midway point or a lockout point by doing lockout work. The problem is not the lockout. The problem is the start. The start defines everything. And how we're positioning and creating tension in the body appropriately to do that. You really need to nail that setup and start. Sometimes slower is better. So a lot of people that have that sticking point halfway up or at lockout, you'll see them when they start the deadlift, they have they immediately move to a really high hip position, extending the legs, which develops a lot because that length tension relationship develops a lot of explosive power, which is what we see Olympic weightlifters do as well, because you will develop more power off the floor, but now you're going to stall out because you're in a poor position, and now you have to be able to finalize the lift. You have to pull your torso over the top of your hips to reclaim position under load, and particularly as we get to maximal load, very, very hard to do. So if we can master the setup, you'll be able to maintain the torso over the top of the hips. And we're not talking stacking it like a squat, but it's still going to be in a leaned forward position, but we're going to be able to complete a hip hinge without extra have to do what I call an erector lift. But you see these people halfway up, 3/4 of the way up, they stall out. First thing happens, like I said, they'll shoot their legs up, have explosive power off the floor, and then be stuck trying to pull their back, trying to pull through their erectors to reclaim that torso position and get it over the top of the hips. We have to be in a position to never lose that. It will slow down the barbell a little bit off the ground when you do that. But one, you'll quit freaking blowing your back out while you deadlift, and you're going to end up deadlifting more.
Awesome, man. Thanks. Yeah, so let's just go into your book a little bit, and of course I'll put a link down below for anybody who wants to check it out themselves.
Okay.
So I guess what was the idea behind it? What's the main message behind it?
So yeah, it's an autobiography in part, and it's something that people have told me I need to do for a really long time. So I have lived a very unique lifestyle, or unique life, per se, and but I wanted it to be much more than an autobiography. I want people to have some huge takeaways from this, and so this book is framed and written so that every chapter has themes to it, and it's driving you to ask questions of yourself and a deeper dive into it to understand truly what are your values, what do you value in life, and then what goals do you really need to establish off of that instead of just like picking goals, which a lot of people just do. But really aligning those goals to those values, and then providing you both the inspiration and tools to live a life that realizes that. And so a little background on my history. So I essentially grew up homeless in the mountains, foraging for food, killing animals in Northern California. And at one point we were taken in by the state. I have 3 sisters and a brother. We're taken in by the state from our parents because, parents were growing drugs. It's mostly legal, in these parts these days anyway, but sure wasn't back in the 70s and 80s. So,
yeah.
There's just some really crazy stuff. I've dealt with murderers, a serial killer, human trafficking.
Wow.
Some pretty freaking nasty shit. And
that's all in the book?
It's all in the book. I came out of that. We got back together with our parents in Oregon, had like a year of normality, and then kind of same back into the living in the mountains, in tents and, whatnot, heating jugs of water in the sun so you could dump it over your head, to bathe with. And, end up, getting in high school, I graduated valedictorian, state level athlete, and got a full ride academic scholarship to go to college, which I did. Before finishing college, I started taking custody of my 3 younger siblings, my sisters, and I ended up raising all of them while I completed my engineering degrees and my master's degree, and was working my career to get them out of the environment that we grew up in, because it got substantially worse. Ended up having a really successful corporate life and career, doing some really cool, crazy stuff, and finally walked away from that to do exactly what I want to do and how I want to contribute in this world and create the culture and environment in all aspects that I believe in around me. So I'm not a rich person as far as money goes, but I am rich in living the life that I choose to live and being the person that I choose to be. And so that's the couple short story, but it's a pretty epic story once you dive into the depths of it, and there's going to be some massive takeaways and evaluation for yourself in the process. And so for me, Kabuki Strength, I believe in living better through strength. That adversity and challenges will make us stronger versions of ourselves. We are not defined by those things that happen to us. We are defined by our actions from those things. Okay? And Kabuki Strength covers the physical aspect of that, but it doesn't cover the mental, emotional, and spiritual sides of it. And so this is my piece to help people on that path.
Wow. Awesome stuff, man. Really powerful message. There's clearly a lot to you beyond just the, ape level strength. Very intelligent guy, compassionate guy. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all that with us.
It's been a pleasure.